The locomotive's whistle cut through the desert air like a knife through leather, announcing its arrival at Mesquite Crossing with a cloud of black smoke that painted the endless blue sky. Clara Whitfield pressed her gloved hand against the grimy window, watching the ramshackle town materialize from the heat shimmer. Red dust coated everything: the wooden buildings, the scattered wagons, even the few scraggly dogs that lay panting in whatever shade they could find. She smoothed her travel-worn dress, a simple brown calico that had seen better days. 3 weeks ago, she'd left Philadelphia in midnight blue silk. Now, she looked like any other frontier woman seeking a new life, which was exactly what she intended. The train lurched to a stop with a grinding of metal on metal. Clara gathered her single carpet bag and joined the stream of passengers disembarking onto the wooden platform. The heat hit her like a physical blow, dry and fierce, sucking the moisture from her lungs. "Watch yourself, miss," the conductor called down. "This ain't no place for a lady traveling alone." Clara offered him a tight smile. If only he knew how much worse the alternative had been: marrying Harold Ashford, her father's business partner, a man who collected wives like trophies and discarded them just as easily. The platform bustled with activity. Rough-looking men hauled freight, their shirts dark with sweat. A group of Mexican workers argued good-naturedly in rapid Spanish near a stack of railroad ties. And there, sitting on an overturned crate, was a boy no more than 7, all knees and elbows, watching everything with sharp, curious eyes. "You got any food, lady?" the boy asked as she passed. Clara paused, taking in his dirt-smudged face and too thin frame. "What's your name?" Benjamin Carter, if you're being formal-like." He grinned, revealing a gap where his front tooth should be. "But nobody's formal in Mesquite Crossing." She opened her carpet bag and pulled out a wrapped bundle of crackers and dried beef, the last of her provisions. "Here, when's the last time you ate a proper meal?" Benji shrugged, already tearing into the food. "Marshal Pike gives me supper sometimes. Mr. Callahan, too, when he's in town with the horses." Before Clara could ask more, a commotion erupted near the freight car. Men were shouting, backing away from something. Then she heard a telltale hissing sound that made her blood run cold. "Dynamite!" someone yelled. "There's dynamite in the—" The explosion knocked Clara off her feet. Wood splintered, metal shrieked, and the world became a chaos of smoke and screaming. She hit the platform hard, her ears ringing, debris raining down around her. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders, hauling her upright and away from the burning freight car. "Move now!" The voice was deep, commanding. Clara found herself half carried, half dragged behind a water tower. Her rescuer pushed her down, shielding her with his body as another explosion rocked the platform. She caught a glimpse of his sun-weathered face, eyes the color of sage honey, a day's worth of stubble on a strong jaw. When the explosions finally stopped, he pulled back, those golden eyes scanning her for injuries. "You hurt." No, I don't think so." Clara's hands shook as she checked herself. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, and her palms were scraped, but nothing serious. "Jace, Mr. Callahan." Benji's voice piped up from nearby. The boy had taken shelter under a wagon, clutching Clara's carpet bag. "I saved the lady's things." The man Jace Callahan relaxed fractionally. "Good thinking. Boy, you hurt." "Nah, I've seen worse." Benji crawled out, dust cascading from his hair. Jace helped Clara to her feet, his touch careful but impersonal. "James Callahan. Most folks call me Jace. You picked a hell of a day to arrive in Mesquite Crossing. Miss Whitfield. Clara Whitfield." She saw something flicker in his eyes at the name. Suspicion recognition. It passed too quickly to tell. Around them, the platform had erupted into organized chaos. Men formed bucket brigades to fight the fires. A woman with a marshal's star on her vest, unusual enough to make Clara stare, was barking orders. "That's Marshal Pike," Benji supplied helpfully. "Eleanor Pike. She don't take guff from nobody. Jace's attention had shifted to the damaged track beyond the platform. His expression darkened. That wasn't meant for the freight car. Look where the rails are twisted. Someone wanted to derail the whole train. But why? Clara asked. Same reason they poisoned the Hendricks well last month. Same reason they've been cutting fence lines and spooking cattle. He turned that penetrating gaze back to her. Someone wants the ranchers out of Rio del Lobo Valley, and they're getting desperate. Marshall Pike approached, her boots punctuating each step. She was a handsome woman in her 40s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Jace, you see who might have done this. Was watering the horses at Sutler's when it happened. Jace's voice carried an edge of frustration. But I'll bet my best saddle this connects to the water rights dispute. The marshal's eyes shifted to Clara, cataloging everything from her torn dress to her Eastern-made boots. You're new. Got a name. Clara Whitfield. I just arrived from... Whitfield. The marshal's eyes sharpened. Any relation to Whitfield and Associates back east? The banking firm. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd hoped to have more time before that particular connection surfaced. My father is Charles Whitfield. Yes. The change in atmosphere was immediate. Jace took a step back, his expression closing off. The marshal's hand drifted toward her holster. Even Benji looked at her differently. Well. A new voice cut through the tension. A man in a spotless black suit picked his way through the debris, somehow managing to avoid getting dust on his polished boots. He was handsome in a sharp, calculating way, with pale blue eyes that reminded Clara of winter ice. A Whitfield in Mesquite Crossing. How interesting. Silas Crane. Jace's voice could have etched glass. Funny how you always show up right after trouble. Crane spread his hands in mock innocence. I was at the bank when I heard the explosion. Naturally, I came to help. His gaze fixed on Clara with uncomfortable intensity. Miss Whitfield, isn't it your father and I have had correspondence about investment opportunities in the territory? I had no idea he was sending a representative. He didn't send me, Clara said firmly. I'm here on my own business. Of course. Crane's smile didn't reach his eyes. Still, it's fortunate you've arrived. There are opportunities here for those with vision and capital. He glanced meaningfully at Jace. The old ways are dying. Smart folks know when to sell. My ranch ain't for sale. Crane, not now. Not ever. Everything's for sale. Callahan, it's just a matter of price. Crane touched the brim of his hat to Clara. Miss Whitfield, I hope we'll have a chance to speak privately. I'm sure you'll find my proposals illuminating. He walked away, and Clara felt like she could breathe again. Marshall Pike broke the silence. Miss Whitfield, you got somewhere to stay. I hadn't arranged anything yet. I was hoping to find lodging and perhaps employment. Employment? Jace's laugh was short and bitter. A banker's daughter looking for work? That's rich. Heat flashed through Clara. I'm perfectly capable of earning my keep. Mr. Callahan, I can keep books, cook, sew, even help with horses if needed. Horses. Now he looked amused. You ever been closer to a horse than a carriage ride through Central Park? I summered at my grandfather's farm in Vermont every year until he died. I can ride, I can drive a team, and I can muck out stalls if I have to. She lifted her chin. Don't assume you know me based on my name. Benji tugged on Jace's sleeve. You need someone to help with the books at the ranch. You said so last week. Said the numbers make your head hurt. That's different, boy. Why, 'cause she's got a famous daddy. Benji's gap-toothed grin was sly. Seems to me that means she knows numbers real good. Marshall Pike cleared her throat. The boy's got a point. Jace, and it'd be better to keep an eye on her at the ranch than have her wandering town asking questions. She gave Clara a hard look. No offense, miss, but your arrival on the same day as this explosion, it's mighty convenient. Clara felt the walls closing in. They thought she was part of some scheme. I had nothing to do with... Maybe not, the marshal said. "But until I know for sure, I'd prefer you stay where someone can watch you. Jace runs the Half Moon Ranch about 5 miles north. It's honest work, if you're really looking for it." Jace looked like he'd swallowed something sour. "Eleanor, it's that or I put her in protective custody. Your choice." Clara straightened her spine. "I accept the position. When do I start?" Jace stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "Heaven help me. Get your things. We're losing daylight, and I want to check the water stations before dark." "I'll help." Benji scrambled to get Clara's carpet bag. As they walked toward the hitching post where Jace's horses waited, Clara caught a glimpse of the damaged rail line. The twisted metal seemed to writhe in the heat shimmer like a snake. Someone had wanted that train to derail, possibly killing everyone aboard, including her. She shivered despite the heat. She'd fled Philadelphia to escape one trap, only to land in another. But at least here, the dangers were visible. Men like Silas Crane showed their threats openly, unlike the subtle poisons of high society. Jace helped her into the wagon with surprising gentleness, his calloused hands careful of her scraped palms. "Fair warning, Miss Whitfield, the Half Moon's no fancy Eastern estate. It's hard work and simple living." "Good." Clara settled her skirts and looked him straight in the eye. "I've had enough of fancy to last a lifetime." Something shifted in his expression. Curiosity, maybe, or a reluctant respect. "We'll see if you still feel that way after a week of desert living." As the wagon rolled out of town, Benji wedged between them on the bench. Clara caught a last glimpse of Silas Crane standing outside the bank. He touched his hat to her, that cold smile playing at his lips. The message was clear. This isn't over. Clara gripped the wagon's side as they hit a rut, dust swirling up around them. Behind, the damaged train sat like a wounded beast, black smoke still rising from the freight car. Ahead, the vast expanse of Rio del Lobo Valley stretched to the horizon, painted in shades of red and gold by the afternoon sun. She'd wanted a new life. It seemed she'd found one complete with dynamite, suspicious ranchers, and a water war that threatened to tear the valley apart. At least, she thought with grim humor, it wasn't boring. The wagon rolled on, carrying her toward whatever fate waited at the Half Moon Ranch, while overhead, vultures circled lazily in the endless New Mexico sky. The Half Moon Ranch sprawled across a natural basin where the Rio del Lobo curved like a silver ribbon through the desert. Clara had expected something rough and temporary, but the main house was solid adobe with a red tile roof, surrounded by cottonwoods that provided blessed shade. Outbuildings dotted the property, a large barn, several corrals, and what looked like a bunkhouse for the hands. "It's bigger than I expected," she admitted as Jace helped her down from the wagon. "My father started it back in '59, built it to last." His voice carried a note of pride mixed with something else, grief, perhaps. "Course, lasting out here means fighting for every drop of water." Benji had already scrambled off to the barn, calling out to someone about the explosion in town. Clara noticed how at home the boy seemed here. "Does Benji stay with you often?" "When he's not causing trouble in town." Jace lifted her carpet bag from the wagon bed. "His folks died of fever 2 years back. Marshal Pike and I take turns looking after him, along with half the valley." A Mexican woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face was weathered but kind, with laugh lines around dark eyes. Dios mío, Jace. What happened?" "We heard the explosion from here. Someone hit the railroad depot. Rosa, this is Miss Whitfield. She'll be helping with the books for a while." He said it like he was announcing a case of measles. "Miss Whitfield, Rosa Morales. She keeps this place from falling apart." Rosa's eyebrows climbed at the name Whitfield, but her smile remained warm. "Welcome, señorita. You look like you could use some water and rest." "Thank you. Clara swayed slightly, the events of the day suddenly catching up with her. Both Jace and Rosa moved to steady her, but it was Rosa who took charge. "Come, you need to sit down and drink something. This heat is no joke for someone not used to it. The house's interior was cool and dim, with thick walls that kept out the worst of the heat. Clara found herself in a kitchen that smelled of coffee and fresh bread, seated at a scarred wooden table while Rosa bustled about. "Small sips," Rosa instructed, handing her a cup of water. "Too fast and you'll be sick." Jace had followed them in, his hat in his hands. "Rosa, she can have the room at the end of the hall, the one with the window facing the mountains." "Say, I'll prepare it." Rosa studied Clara with knowing eyes. "You're not what I expected when Jace said a banker's daughter was coming." "Nobody said she was coming," Jace protested. "She just appeared." "Like an answer to prayer." "Perhaps." Rosa's tone was innocent, but her eyes twinkled. "You did say you needed help with the books." "That's not—" Jace stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "I need to check the water stations. Cole Maddox was sniffing around the north pasture last week." "Cole Maddox?" Clara asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Silas Crane's hired gun," Rosa said quietly. "A cold one. That man, they say he'd shoot his own shadow if Crane paid him to." Jace settled his hat back on his head. "Lock the doors at sunset, and keep the rifle handy." After he left, Rosa turned to Clara. "So, you're running from something?" It wasn't a question. Clara took another sip of water, choosing her words carefully. "What makes you say that?" "A wealthy woman doesn't come to Mesquite Crossing for the scenery, and you have the look like a rabbit that's heard the hawk but doesn't know which way to run." Rosa's expression softened. "We all came here running from something. Señorita, no shame in it." Clara found herself blinking back unexpected tears. The simple kindness, after weeks of looking over her shoulder, nearly undid her. "My father wanted me to marry his business partner, a man who goes through wives like handkerchiefs." "Ah," Rosa nodded as if this explained everything. "And your father, he didn't care. He cared about the merger it would bring, the expansion of the banking empire." Clara laughed bitterly. "I was just another asset to be traded. Men and their empires." Rosa shook her head. "Come, I'll show you your room. You'll want to wash and change before dinner." The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small desk by the window. Through the glass, Clara could see the mountains turning purple in the late afternoon light. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it. Rosa paused at the door. "Señorita Jace is a good man, but he's been hurt. Don't judge him too harshly for his suspicions." After Rosa left, Clara unpacked her few belongings. 3 dresses, all practical, her mother's silver brush, a small leather journal, and hidden in the lining of her carpet bag, the money she'd managed to take enough to start over. She'd hoped. She washed the dust from her face and hands, changed into a clean dress, and made her way back to the kitchen. Rosa had her elbow deep in bread dough, and Clara automatically moved to help. "You know kitchen work," Rosa looked surprised. "My grandmother insisted, said a woman should know how to feed herself and others, no matter how many servants she had." Clara tied on the apron Rosa offered. "What can I do?" They worked companionably, preparing dinner for the ranch hands. Clara learned that the Half Moon employed 6 men full-time, plus seasonal workers during roundup. "Good men," Rosa assured her, "loyal to Jace and the brand." "But times are hard," Rosa admitted, chopping onions with practiced efficiency. "The drought last year killed many cattle, and now this fighting over water rights." She shook her head. "How does it work?" Clara asked. "The water rights. It's supposed to be simple. First to use the water has first right to it, but Crane, he's been buying up old claims, filing new ones, twisting the law." Rosa's knife came down harder. "He controls the Santa Rita Reservoir now, says he's managing it for everyone's benefit. But he's not. Last month, 3 wells went dry on ranches that wouldn't sell to him." Coincidence. Rosa made a disgusted sound. "And Marshall Pike, her hands are tied without proof." The kitchen door banged open, making both women jump, but it was only Benji, carrying an armload of firewood. "Jay said I could stay for dinner if I helped out," he announced, depositing the wood by the stove. "Is it true you can cipher, Miss Clara?"
"I can." Clara smiled at his eagerness. "Do you know your numbers?"
"Some. Marshall Pike's been teaching me when she has time." He scrambled onto a stool. "I can write my name, too. Want to see?" The next hour passed pleasantly, with Clara helping Benji practice his letters while Rosa cooked. The boy was quick, eager to learn, and Clara found herself wondering why he wasn't in school. "Ain't no school in Mesquite Crossing," Benji explained when she asked. "Used to be a teacher, but she married and moved to California." The ranch hands began filtering in as the sun set tough, weathered men who touched their hats politely to Clara but kept their distance. She served the meal alongside Rosa, noting the empty chair at the head of the table. "Jace don't usually eat with the hands. One of the men, Tom," she thought explained, "keeps to himself mostly." After dinner, Clara helped Rosa clean up while the men dispersed to their evening chores. Through the window, she could see lanterns moving in the barn, hear the low murmur of voices and the occasional whinny of horses. "I should look at those books," Clara said eventually. "If I'm to help with them." Rosa directed her to Jace's study, a small room off the main hallway. It was spartanly furnished: a desk, 2 chairs, shelves lined with ledgers and a few books. But what caught her eye was the cabinet in the corner, its door slightly ajar. Clara knew she shouldn't look, but something instinct perhaps made her cross the room and open it fully. Inside were stacks of papers, and her breath caught as she recognized what they were. Promissory notes, liens, all bearing the seal of Mesquite Crossing Bank. And the amounts. Clara sat down hard, pulling the papers into the light. If these were real, the Half Moon Ranch owed nearly $50,000, an impossible sum for a ranch this size. "Find something interesting." Clara jumped. Jay stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I was looking for the account books," she said, hating how guilty she sounded. "These papers say I'm in debt up to my eyeballs." "Yeah, I know." He crossed to the desk, poured whiskey from a bottle she hadn't noticed. "Question is, do you believe them?" Clara studied the documents more carefully. The signatures, the dates, the amounts. "These have been altered," she said slowly. "Look, the ink color is different here, and this date doesn't match the watermark on the paper." Jace went very still. "You can tell that." "My father is a banker. I grew up around financial documents." She held one up to the lamp. "This paper wasn't even manufactured until 1875, but the note is dated 1873. "Son of a—" Jace set down his glass carefully. "Can you prove it in court?" "Possibly, but we'd need the original documents to compare." Clara stopped, understanding flooding through her. "The bank. Crane controls the bank now. Doesn't he?" "Bought it 6 months ago, right before these notes started appearing." Jace's smile was grim. "You see the problem?" Clara did. Without access to the original records, it would be Jace's word against official bank documents. And if Crane was systematically forging debts— "How many other ranchers?" she asked. 3 have already sold. 2 more are close." Jace moved to the window, staring out at the darkness. "He's squeezing us out, piece by piece, and once he controls all the land along the Rio del Lobo, he controls the water," Clara finished, "and everyone else has to pay whatever he asks or go dry. Now you know why folks were suspicious when Charles Whitfield's daughters showed up the same day someone tried to blow up the railroad." Clara bristled. "You think I'm part of this?" "I think it's mighty convenient." But his voice lacked heat. "Then again, if you were working with Crane, you probably wouldn't have pointed out his forgeries." A commotion outside cut off Clara's response. Horses, riding hard. Jace grabbed the rifle from beside the door, motioning for Clara to stay back. But it was Tom who burst through the front door. "Boss, the North Station. Someone dynamited the dam waters flooding the whole pasture." Jace cursed. "Anyone hurt?" "No, but if we don't do something fast, we'll lose that whole section. Water'll wash everything down to bare rock. Get every man, bring shovels, sandbags, whatever we've got." Jace was already moving. "We need to channel that water before it hits the main herd." "I can help," Clara said. "You can stay here where it's safe." But he paused at her expression. "You ever work a shovel?" "I told you. Vermont summers. My grandfather believed in everyone working." He studied her for a heartbeat, then nodded. "Rosa, we need all the feed sacks you can spare. Tom, get her a mount. Nothing too spirited." 20 minutes later, Clara found herself racing through the darkness on a steady mare. Her dress hiked up scandalously to allow her to ride astride. The sound of rushing water grew louder, and then they crested a rise and she saw it a torrent pouring through the broken dam, turning the neat irrigation channels into chaos. Men were already working, trying to build barriers with whatever they could find. Jace shouted orders, directing the effort with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. Clara dismounted and grabbed a shovel. The next hours blurred together. Dig, fill, carry, place. Her hands blistered inside her gloves. Her back screamed. But she kept working alongside the men, earning surprised looks that gradually turned to respect. "Channel's holding," someone shouted. "It's working!" They'd managed to direct most of the flow back toward the river, saving the pasture. Clara leaned on her shovel, breathing hard, and found Jace watching her. "Not bad for a banker's daughter," he said. Before she could respond, one of the hands called out, "Boss, better look at this!" Near the broken dam, half hidden in the mud, was a piece of torn fabric. Distinctive fabric, the same unusual pattern Cole Maddox had been wearing in town. Jace's expression darkened as he held it up. Well, seems Crane's dog got careless." "Will Marshal Pike arrest him?" Clara asked. "On what evidence?" "A scrap of cloth." Jace shook his head. "Maddox'll say he lost it days ago, somewhere else entirely, and Crane will have 3 witnesses swearing he was playing cards in town all evening." The ride back was subdued. Clara's entire body ached, and she knew tomorrow would be worse. But there was also a fierce satisfaction. They'd fought back against Crane's sabotage and won this round, at least. Back at the ranch, Rosa had hot water and clean clothes waiting. As Clara soaked her blistered hands, she thought about those forged documents. Her father had taught her to read financial records like others read books. Maybe, just maybe, she could find something Crane had missed. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." It was Jace, looking uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology, and thanks. You worked as hard as any hand out there tonight." "I told you I would." "Yeah, you did." He turned his hat in his hands. "Look, I know you're running from something back east. That's your business. But if you're straight with me, I'll be straight with you. Deal?" Clara met his eyes. "Deal." He nodded and turned to go, then paused. "Those documents, could you really prove they're forged?" "Give me time and access to enough records. Yes. The question is whether any judge would listen to a woman's testimony about financial matters. Judge Harrigan might. He's old-fashioned, but fair." Jace's smile was grim. "Course, we'd have to keep you alive long enough to testify. Crane doesn't take kindly to folks interfering with his plans." After he left, Clara sat in the lamplight, thinking. She'd fled one dangerous situation only to land in another, but this felt different. In Philadelphia, she'd been alone, a pawn in her father's games. Here, she had allies Rosa, who'd accepted her without question, the ranch hands who'd nodded approval as she worked beside them, even Jace, despite his suspicions. And somewhere in those forged documents was the key to stopping Silas Crane. She just had to find it before he realized what she was doing. Outside her window, a coyote howled, the sound carrying across the desert. Clara touched her blistered palms gingerly and smiled. Let Crane come. She was done running. The sandstorm announced itself with a wall of red-brown dust that swallowed the horizon like a biblical plague. Clara had been in the south pasture with Jace, checking on the horses, when the temperature suddenly dropped and the air grew thick with static. "Storm coming," Jace said, his voice tight. He was already moving, grabbing lead ropes. "We need to get these horses to shelter, now." Clara had never seen him truly worried before, even during the dam break. He'd remained controlled, but now his movements were sharp with urgency. "How bad?" she asked, helping him halter a nervous mare. "Bad enough." The wind was already picking up, sending tumbleweeds racing past like fleeing animals. These spring storms can last hours. Sand gets in everything. Eyes, lungs, water supplies. We've got maybe 20 minutes before it hits. They worked in tense silence, leading the horses toward the barn. The animals sensed danger, tossing their heads and dancing sideways. Clara's mare suddenly reared, the rope burning through her hands. "Easy, girl." She fought to control the panicking animal as the first wall of sand slammed into them. The world disappeared. Clara couldn't see more than 3 feet, couldn't breathe without choking. Sand stung every inch of exposed skin like tiny needles. The mare's rope slipped from her bleeding hands. Then Jace was there, one arm around her waist, dragging her toward what she hoped was shelter. She couldn't see, couldn't think, could only trust his sense of direction. They stumbled into something solid, a wall. Jace felt along it until he found a door, wrestled it open against the wind. They tumbled inside, and he slammed it shut. Clara doubled over, coughing. They were in some kind of root cellar, she realized. Dark, musty, but blessed relief from the scouring sand. "You all right?" Jace's voice was rough. He was a shadow in the darkness, but she could feel him close, still steadying her. "The horses." "They'll find shelter. Animals are smarter than people that way." He guided her to what felt like a bench along the wall. "Let me see your hands." She held them out, though they could barely see in the dim light filtering through cracks in the door. The rope burns were raw and bleeding. "Damn it, Clara!" His touch was gentle as he examined the damage. "Why didn't you let go? That mare is worth more than I make in a month." "No horse is worth—" He stopped, took a breath. "There's a water barrel in the corner. We need to clean these." They felt their way deeper into the cellar. It was bigger than Clara had first thought, carved from the earth and reinforced with timber. Shelves lined the walls, holding preserved goods and emergency supplies. Jace found the water, tore strips from his shirt to use as bandages. As he worked on her hands, Clara became aware of how close they were sitting, how his fingers trembled slightly despite his careful movements. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what, getting you caught in a sandstorm? For coming back for me." His hands stilled on hers. In the dim light, she could just make out his profile, the tension in his jaw. "I wouldn't leave anyone out in that. But especially not the woman who might be able to prove you don't owe $50,000. She'd meant it as a joke, but he didn't smile. "That's not why—" The wind howled outside, rattling the door in its frame. Sand sifted through the cracks, a constant reminder of the chaos beyond their shelter. But inside, the world had shrunk to just the two of them and the careful way he wrapped her palms. "Tell me about your father's ranch," Clara said, needing to break the tension. "You said he built it in '59. Jace leaned back against the wall, though he didn't move away. "Michael Callahan came out from Illinois with big dreams and a pregnant wife. Built the first cabin with his own hands while my mother was carrying me. She must have been strong. Strongest woman I ever knew. Until—" He caught himself, continued more carefully. "She died when I was 12. Fever took her and my baby sister in the same week. Clara's chest tightened.
I'm sorry.
Long time ago. But his voice said otherwise. My father never got over it. Threw himself into the ranch, building it bigger, better. Said it would be their legacy. He laughed without humor. Now Crane's trying to steal it with forged paper. We'll stop him, Clara said fiercely. Will we? Jace turned to look at her fully. You could leave tomorrow. Take the next train east and forget Mesquite Crossing ever existed. Why stay and fight someone else's battle? It was a fair question. Clara thought about how to answer, how to explain the relief of being needed for her skills rather than her name, the freedom of earning her place through work instead of birthright.
In Philadelphia,
she said slowly,
I was currency, something to be traded for advantage. Here,
she flexed her bandaged hands. Here, I'm useful. What I do matters. Is that all? The question hung between them. Clara could feel the heat of him in the small space, could smell leather and horse and something uniquely him. Her heart was doing dangerous things in her chest. No, she admitted. That's not all. He leaned closer, and for a moment she thought, but then the wind shrieked louder, and something crashed against the door. They both jumped. Storm's getting worse, Jace said, his voice carefully neutral. He moved to check the door's security. We could be here a while. They settled in to wait, talking to pass the time. Clara learned about the ranch's early days, about cattle drives and Apache raids, about the delicate balance of survival in the desert. Jace had a storyteller's gift when he relaxed, painting pictures with words. What about you? He asked eventually. What was it like, growing up in a banking family?
Ledgers for bedtime stories,
Clara said wryly.
My father believed in preparing me to be an asset to whoever I married. Languages, mathematics, accounting, everything a wealthy man's wife might need to help manage his empire.
But not to manage your own. Women don't have empires. Mr. Callahan, we have husbands. That what you believe? Clara thought of Marshall Pike with her star and her authority, of Rosa running the ranch house with quiet efficiency. Not anymore. The storm raged on. They shared the water, the dried fruit and jerky Jace found on the shelves. The forced intimacy should have been awkward, but instead, it felt like a respite from the world and its expectations.
I was engaged once,
Jace said suddenly, before the war. Clara waited, sensing the weight of the confession. Sarah Hendricks, rancher's daughter from the next valley. Pretty, practical. Everything a rancher's wife should be. He twisted the loose end of her bandage between his fingers. I was 19 and stupid enough to think love conquered all. What happened? War happened. I joined the cavalry. Thought I'd be home in 6 months with glory and stories. Instead, he shrugged. 4 years later, I came back to find her married to my best friend. Can't say I blamed her. The boy who left wasn't the man who returned. Did you love her?
I loved who we were before. Young, innocent, thinking the world was simple.
He met her eyes.
The war beat that out of me. Showed me how people betray each other when survival's on the line.
Is that why you were so suspicious of me? Partly. Also because I've learned to read people. And you, Clara Whitfield, are running from something that scares you more than sandstorms or gunfights. She looked away.
We all have our demons.
True enough. He was quiet for a moment. But sometimes sharing the load makes them lighter. Clara found herself telling him then about her mother's death when she was 16, about the way her father had grown colder, more calculating, about Harold Ashford with his 3 dead wives and hungry eyes.
He collects women like trophies,
she said, her voice barely above a whisper.
The first wife died in childbirth. The second fell down the stairs. The third drowned in her bath.
All accidents, of course. Jace's expression darkened. And your father wanted you to marry this man. The merger would have made us the largest banking consortium on the eastern seaboard. Clara laughed bitterly. What's one daughter against an empire? So you ran.
I took what money I could and bought a ticket to the furthest place the railroad went. She managed to smile. Mesquite Crossing seemed like the end of the earth.
It nearly was, with that explosion.
They fell silent, listening to the storm. It seemed to be weakening, the howl of the wind less violent, but neither moved to check. Clara, Jace's voice was serious, if Crane realizes you can expose his forgeries.
I know the risks. Do you men like Crane don't hesitate to remove obstacles? And a woman alone.
I'm not alone. The words came out fiercer than she'd intended. Am I? He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression.
No, you're not alone. The door suddenly flew open, sand swirling in, but beyond it, Clara could see clearer air. The storm was passing. They emerged from the cellar like survivors from a shipwreck. The landscape had changed, new dunes where none had been. Familiar landmarks obscured, but the ranch building stood firm, and Clara could see figures moving, checking damage.
The horses,
she suddenly remembered.
But there they were, huddled against the lee side of the barn, including her mare, desert-wise. They'd found shelter on their own.
Told you, Jace said with a slight smile. Smarter than people. They walked back slowly, both reluctant to rejoin the world. As they neared the house, Rosa appeared on the porch, relief clear on her face.
Thank God we were about to send search parties. She took in their closeness, their bandaged hands, and something knowing flickered in her eyes. Come, you both need food and rest.
But there was no rest. Tom met them with urgent news the storm had shifted the river's course, threatening to bypass the Half Moon's irrigation gates entirely.
If we don't fix it fast, we'll lose our water rights, he said grimly. First use. First right, but only if we can prove continuous use.
Clara watched Jace's shoulders tighten.
Another crisis, another battle in Crane's war of attrition. But when he looked at her, she saw determination rather than defeat.
We'll fix it, he said simply. We always do. As the men prepared for another emergency, Clara touched her bandaged palms in the cellar, listening to the storm. She'd felt something shift between them. Not love, not yet, but possibility, understanding, a connection forged in darkness and wind. She thought of the bowline knot Jace had mentioned, once broken rope that could be retied stronger than before if you knew the trick. Maybe that's what they were, both of them. Broken by their pasts, but finding new ways to hold strong. The setting sun painted the storm-scoured landscape in shades of gold and scarlet. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new schemes from Silas Crane. But tonight, Clara felt less like a refugee and more like she belonged. Benji came running from the barn, covered in dust but grinning. That was something, wait till I tell Marshal Pike, a real sandstorm. His enthusiasm was infectious. Even Jace smiled as the boy chattered about the adventure, and Clara, watching them, felt a dangerous warmth in her chest. She was done running. Whatever came next, she would face it here, with these people who'd sheltered her from more than just the storm. Clara's fingers traced over the ledger entries by lamplight, her eyes burning from hours of careful examination. She'd commandeered a corner of Jace's study, spreading documents across every available surface. 3 weeks at the Half Moon had given her access to years of records, and the pattern was becoming clear. Found something. Jace appeared in the doorway with a cup of coffee.
Look at this.
She pointed to a series of entries. Every forged note appears exactly 60 days after a legitimate transaction. Same amount, similar terms, but the interest rates are tripled. He set the coffee beside her, leaning close to study the papers, like someone's taking real debts and creating shadows of them.
Exactly, but here's the interesting part.
Clara pulled out another ledger. The bank's own records show deposits matching these fake payments. Someone's been making it look like you've been paying on debts that don't exist.
Creating a paper trail. Jace whistled low. That's elaborate, And expensive. Whoever's doing this has been putting up their own money to make the fraud look legitimate. Clara sat back, rubbing her temples. The question is, why spend thousands to steal ranches worth maybe twice that? Because it's not about the ranches. Marshal Pike stood in the doorway, her expression grim. Mind if I come in? We need to talk. They made room as the marshal spread her own documents on the desk. I've been investigating the sales of the 3 ranches Crane's already acquired. Every single one sits on top of the old Spanish land grant that controls the headwaters of the Rio del Lobo. Clara's breath caught. Water rights. Not just water rights. Complete control of the river from source to valley. The Spanish grant predates all other claims. It's ironclad. But it was divided among 7 families over the years. The 7 founding ranches, Jace said slowly. Crane needs all of them to reunify the grant. And once he does, every drop of water in this valley belongs to him. Legally. Pike's jaw tightened. He could charge whatever he wants, or cut people off entirely. Turn the whole region into his private empire. A sound from outside made them all freeze. Footsteps on the porch, too heavy for Rosa or Benji. Jace moved toward his rifle, but Pike held up a hand. Let me... She opened the door carefully. Well, Cole Maddox, bit late for a social call. Clara glimpsed the gunman past Pike's shoulder, lean, cold-eyed, with a smile that never reached past his lips. Marshal, just delivering a message for Miss Whitfield. I don't recall inviting you onto my property, Jace said, his voice dangerous. No invitation needed for mail delivery. Maddox held up an envelope. From her father, seemed urgent. Clara's stomach dropped. She took the letter with steady hands, though her heart raced. Her father's precise handwriting stared back at her. I'll wait for a reply. Maddox said smoothly, You'll leave now. Pike countered. The lady can send any reply through proper channels. For a moment, violence crackled in the air. Then Maddox touched his hat brim. Another time. Then... His eyes found Clara's. Mr. Crane sends his regards. Says he hopes you're finding the valley. Educational. After he left, Clara sank into a chair, the letter trembling in her hands. He knows. Crane knows what I'm doing. What does your father say? Jace asked. She broke the seal, read quickly, then laughed a bitter sound. He's disowned me, formally, cast me out of the family for bringing shame upon the Whitfield name, and he's frozen my accounts, invalidated my letters of credit. Clara. Rosa had appeared, drawn by the commotion. There's more. He mentions that Harold Ashford is grievously disappointed by my behavior, but remains hopeful for reconciliation. Clara crumpled the letter. Translation, Harold's still hunting me. This changes things, Pike said carefully. Without your family's protection. Without my family's protection, I'm nobody. Just another woman with no legal standing and no resources. Clara stood, squaring her shoulders. Which means I've got nothing left to lose. Jace caught her arm. That's not true. Isn't it? She met his eyes. At least now we know why Maddox really came. To let me know I'm alone and vulnerable. You're not alone. His grip tightened. And Crane just made a mistake, showing his hand like this. Before anyone could respond, Benji burst through the door. Fire! There's fire at the water station! They raced outside to see an orange glow on the horizon. Not the water station worse. The dam itself was ablaze. The wooden supports that controlled the flow gates consumed by flames. That's impossible, Tom said, joining them. Wood that's been soaked for years doesn't just burn. It does if someone soaks it in coal oil first. Jace was already moving. Get every hand, every bucket. If those gates burned through. He didn't need to finish. Without the gates, the reservoir would empty into the desert, leaving every ranch downstream dry for months. The next hours were a blur of smoke and desperation. Clara worked alongside the men, passing buckets in a human chain while the heat seared their faces. She glimpsed Benji darting dangerously close to fill smaller containers, saw Rosa organizing the effort with calm efficiency. But it wasn't enough. The fire was too hot, too well set. Just as Clara thought they'd have to retreat, a new voice rang out. "Make way, dynamite coming through." A grizzled miner Clara recognized from town appeared with a pack of explosives. "Blow the earthwork upstream," he explained quickly. "Flood the whole structure. Only way to stop it now." Jace made the call. They retreated to safe distance as the miner set his charges. The explosion shook the ground, and then a wall of water crashed over the burning dam, extinguishing the flames in a hiss of steam. As dawn broke, they surveyed the damage. The gates were destroyed, but the earthen dam itself held. Water flowed freely, too freely. "We've got maybe a week before the reservoir's empty," Tom calculated grimly. "Then we've got a week to build new gates." Jace turned to the assembled crowd, his own hands plus a dozen men from neighboring ranches who'd seen the fire and come to help. "I know you've all got your own troubles, but if we work together—" "Together," Hank Morrison from the Box M spat tobacco juice. "While you're harboring that banker's daughter, for all we know, she's reporting everything back to her daddy." "Watch your tongue," Jace warned. "Or what you'll defend her honor," Morrison laughed harshly. "Open your eyes. Callahan. Crane's attacks doubled after she arrived." "Correlation isn't causation," Clara said quietly. Everyone turned to stare. "Yes, the attacks increased after I arrived, because Crane knows I can expose his forgeries. He's trying to force me out before I find proof." "Convenient story," Morrison sneered. "Hank," Marshal Pike's voice cut through. "Miss Whitfield spent the night fighting that fire same as you, and her father just cut her off completely. If she's Crane's spy, she's doing a poor job of it." "I can prove what I'm saying," Clara continued. "Give me one day. Let me show you exactly how Crane's been stealing from all of us." "All of us?" Morrison scoffed. "You're not one of us, girl." "No." Clara held up her blistered hands. "I've worked this ranch, fought for this water, same as any of you. When does that make me one of you when I've been here a year 5'10"? She met each skeptical gaze. "Or is it that I'll never belong because I wasn't born here?" Silence stretched. Then old Samuel Martinez, whose family had ranched the valley for 3 generations, spoke up. "The señorita has a point. We all came from somewhere else, sometime or other." "One day," Jace said firmly. "She gets one day to show her proof. Then we decide." The crowd dispersed slowly, muttering. Clara felt the weight of their suspicion like a physical thing. "That was brave," Rosa said softly. "Or foolish." "Maybe both." Clara looked at the damaged dam. "But I meant what I said. I've got nothing left to lose." "Don't say that." Jace's voice was rough. "Don't ever say that." That night, Clara spread every document she'd collected across the main room of the house. The ranch hands gathered, skeptical but curious, using charcoal on the whitewashed wall. She began to chart the web of fraud. "Here's the Hendricks Ranch," she marked. "Sold after their well was poisoned. But look," she traced connections. The poison was bought using a bank draft from this shell company, the same company that held the forged notes. Step by step, she laid it out. The patterns, the connections, the money trail that led back to Crane time and again. The men listened, their skepticism gradually giving way to anger. "The bastard," Tom breathed. "He's been playing us against each other while robbing us all blind." "But can we prove it in court?" Morrison had returned. Drawn by word of the meeting, Clara pulled out her final piece of evidence, a letter she'd found hidden in the bank records. "This is from Crane, to his lawyer in Santa Fe. He details the entire plan, brags about how these simple ranchers will never figure it out." "Where did you get that?" Pike demanded. Clara smiled slightly. "The same place I learned that Benji's been teaching himself to pick locks. He's very talented." Benji grinned unrepentantly from his perch by the door.
It won't hold up, Morrison said, but his protest was weaker now. Stolen evidence? No, but this will... Clara produced another document. A signed affidavit from the former bank clerk, Thomas Winters. He fled to Denver after Crane threatened his family, but he's willing to testify. How did you... I telegraphed every Thomas Winters in Denver until I found him. Promised him protection if he'd tell the truth. The room erupted in discussion. Plans were made, strategies debated, and through it all, Clara felt their acceptance settling around her like a blanket. Later, as the meeting broke up, Jace found her on the porch. You did it. Turned them around. For now. She was exhausted, but oddly exhilarated. Crane won't give up easily. No, he won't. Jace stepped closer. Clara, what you said about having nothing to lose. I was wrong. She looked up at him. I have everything to lose now. This place, these people, you. He kissed her then, soft and careful, as if she might break. Or maybe as if he might. When they parted, his eyes were dark with emotion. We're going to win this, he said. Together, she agreed. Inside the house, Benji's voice piped up. Finally, Rosa, you owe me 50 cents. I told you they'd kiss before the month was out. Despite everything, the fire, the threats, the battle ahead. Clara laughed. She was home. Whatever came next, she'd face it with her family, her real family, chosen not by blood but by bond. The desert night wrapped around them, vast and full of stars. As they prepared for war, the Mesquite Crossing town square buzzed with preparation for the annual chili cook-off. But Clara could feel the undercurrent of tension beneath the festive atmosphere. Whispers followed her as she helped Rosa set up their booth, the banker's daughter who'd brought trouble to the valley. Let them talk, Rosa said firmly, arranging pots with practiced efficiency. Today we cook, tomorrow we fight. The cook-off was more than a competition. It was a fundraiser to repair the damaged dam. Every ranch family contributed, turning the event into a display of community solidarity that Crane's machinations hadn't yet destroyed. Miss Whitfield. The voice dripped false honey. Clara turned to find Mrs. Prudence Garrett, the mayor's wife and self-appointed social arbiter of Mesquite Crossing. How enterprising of you to participate, though I suppose cooking is less dangerous than your other activities. Mrs. Garrett. Clara kept her voice level. How kind of you to concern yourself with my activities. Someone must think of propriety. The woman's eyes glittered with malice. A young woman, unmarried, living at a bachelor's ranch, working alongside rough men. Why, in my day... In your day, women didn't have the vote either, Marshall Pike interrupted, appearing at Clara's shoulder. Times change. Prudence. Mrs. Garrett huffed but retreated, leaving Clara shaking with suppressed anger. Don't let her rattle you, Pike advised. She's been bitter since Crane started courting her daughter and then dropped her for a richer prospect. Across the square, Clara spotted Silas Crane himself, immaculate despite the heat, surrounded by his usual coterie of followers. He caught her eye and raised his hat mockingly. He's bold, showing up here, Clara muttered. He's making a point, Pike replied. This is his town, or so he wants everyone to think. The cooking began in earnest as the sun climbed. Clara had learned Rosa's recipe over the past weeks, a complex blend of chilies, meat, and secret ingredients passed down through generations. Working beside Rosa felt like being accepted into something precious and private. You have good hands for this, Rosa observed, watching Clara grind spices. Patient, careful. My grandmother again, Clara smiled. She said cooking was like chemistry, precision matters. Benji darted between the booths, officially helping but mostly sampling everyone's offerings. His cheerful presence lightened the mood wherever he went. Miss Clara. He bounded up, cheeks flushed with excitement. Mister, Patterson says there's gonna be dancing later. Real music and everything.
Is that so?
Clara ruffled his hair, leaving a streak of chili powder. You'll dance with Mr. Jace, won't you? He never dances, but Rosa says he used to be real good at it. Before the Clara could answer, a commotion erupted near the judging table. Hank Morrison was nose to nose with one of Crane's men, both red-faced and shouting. You sabotaged my chili, Morrison accused. You're drunk, old man, the other sneered. Can't blame your poor cooking on... Morrison swung. The punch connected solidly, sending Crane's man sprawling. In seconds, the confrontation exploded into a general brawl as old grievances found violent expression. Clara grabbed Benji, pulling him behind their booth as fists flew and women screamed. She saw Jace wading into the melee, trying to separate combatants, while Marshal Pike fired her pistol into the air. Enough, Pike's voice cut through the chaos. Next man who throws a punch spends a week in my jail. The fighting subsided sullenly. Morrison sported a split lip, and several others nursed various injuries. The festive mood lay in tatters. This is what we've become, old Samuel Martinez said sadly, fighting each other while Crane watches and laughs. Clara looked around at the dispirited faces and made a decision. She climbed onto a crate, raising her voice. Mister, Martinez is right. This is what Crane wants us divided. Suspicious. Fighting among ourselves. Easy for you to say. Someone called out. You've only been here a month. Yes, I'm new here, Clara acknowledged. But I've seen communities die from the inside out. I've watched fear and suspicion poison good people until they destroy themselves. She took a breath. My father built his empire that way, turning partner against partner until he stood alone on top. Don't let Crane do the same to you. Pretty words. Mrs. Garrett sniffed. But what do you actually know about our troubles? I know the Hendricks family has been here since 1,852 inches, Clara said, meeting skeptical gazes steadily. I know the Martinez family fought alongside the original settlers against Apache raids. I know Tom Brennan mortgaged everything to bring his bride from Ireland, and the whole town pitched in to help build their house. She continued, naming families, histories, connections, things she'd learned from patient listening over the past weeks. You're not just neighbors. You're family, bound by shared struggles and common dreams. That's what Crane fears most, that unity. That's why he's working so hard to break it. Silence stretched. Then Morrison, blood still on his chin, spoke gruffly. The girl's got a point. She does, Martinez agreed. Perhaps we should remember what we're fighting for, not against. The mood shifted, tentatively at first. People began cleaning up the mess, resetting overturned tables. Someone produced a fiddle, and music drifted across the square. Not bad, Jace said quietly, appearing at Clara's side. You've got a gift for speeches. I learned from watching my father, she said wryly, though I try to use the skills for better purposes. As afternoon faded to evening, the cook-off resumed with determined cheer. When the prizes were awarded, Rosa won second place, beaten only by Martinez's legendary 5-alarm recipe. The dancing began. Clara watched from the sidelines as couples whirled past. The anger and suspicion hadn't vanished entirely, but for now, the community chose celebration over conflict. May I have this dance? She turned to find Jace, hand extended, looking uncharacteristically nervous. I thought you didn't dance anymore. I make exceptions. His smile was crooked. Besides, Benji bet Tom 50 cents I wouldn't ask you. Can't let the boy lose money. She took his hand, letting him lead her into the crowd. He was good, better than good, sure and strong, guiding her through the steps as if they'd been partners for years. Where did a rancher learn to dance like this? She asked as he spun her expertly. My mother. She insisted a gentleman should know how to properly escort a lady. His expression softened. She would have liked you. A troublemaking Eastern banker's daughter.
A brave woman who stands up for what's right. His hand tightened on hers. Who fights for people who aren't even hers to claim. They are mine, Clara said fiercely. I choose them, and they're mine. He pulled her closer. Propriety be damned. Around them, other couples danced. But Clara was aware only of him, the warmth of his hand, the solid strength of his shoulder under her palm. People are staring, she murmured. Let them. But he guided her toward the edge of the dancers, where Chinese lanterns cast softer light. Clara, what you did today. Jace, Miss Clara! Benji's voice shattered the moment. The boy raced up, eyes wide with excitement and fear. Come quick, I saw something. They followed him to the alley behind the general store. Benji pointed to fresh wagon tracks in the dust. Cole Maddox was here, loading boxes into a wagon. Real careful like. Jace knelt, examining the tracks. Heavy load, deep ruts. When? During the fight. I followed him. I know you said not to, but... Benji bit his lip. He went toward the old mine road. The abandoned silver mine, Clara asked. Why would... She stopped, understanding flooding through. The explosives, from the mine. He's planning something, Jace said grimly. Something big. They found Marshal Pike, pulling her away from the festivities. She listened to Benji's report with growing concern. I'll get some men, she decided. Check it out quiet-like. I'm coming, Jace said. And leave the women and children here unprotected? I don't think so. Pike's smile was sharp. Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on our visiting banker. Crane's still circling like a vulture, as if summoned. Crane appeared at Clara's elbow. Miss Whitfield, might I have a word privately? Anything you have to say, Jace began. It's all right. Clara touched his arm. I'll hear what he has to say. She let Crane guide her to a quieter corner, though she made sure to stay within sight of the crowd. His smile was reptilian in the lantern light. You've caused quite a stir. He began conversationally. Turning my own strategies against me, I admire that. What do you want, Mr. Crane? To make you an offer? A generous one. He pulled out a leather folder. $50,000. Cash. All yours. Deposited in any bank you choose. In exchange, you leave Mesquite Crossing tonight and never return. Clara didn't even look at the bank draft. No. $75,000. No. You realize what you're risking a woman alone. No family, no legal protection. His voice hardened. Accidents happen in the desert, tragic ones. Is that a threat? An observation. He leaned closer. Your friend Callahan has already lost one woman he cared about. Sarah Hendricks died so tragically young. Fever, they said, though some whispered about the strange symptoms. Ice formed in Clara's stomach. You killed her. Prove it. His smile widened. Just as you can't prove anything else without witnesses who might disappear or suffer accidents. That boy, for instance. So curious, always poking around where he shouldn't. If you touch Benji... I don't hurt children, Miss Whitfield. But the desert is dangerous. So many ways a small boy could come to grief. He straightened his jacket. 100,000. My final offer. Take it and run. Or stay and watch everyone you've grown fond of suffer for your stubbornness. Clara met his pale eyes steadily. You're afraid. All this bluster. These threats, you're terrified that I've already found enough to destroy you. Something flickered in his expression. You have no idea what you're playing with, little girl. Don't I? She smiled coldly. Thomas Winters sends his regards. By the way, he's quite safe in Denver, with copies of all his testimony in multiple hands. Oh, and that shell company you've been using, Hudson Enterprises, I've traced it back to your brother-in-law in St. Louis. He's agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Crane went very still. You're lying. Am I? Clara pulled out a telegram. letting him see just enough to recognize the official seal. "Your house of cards is falling, Mr. Crane. The only question is whether you'll be buried in the rubble." "This isn't over," he snarled. "No," she agreed, "but it will be soon." He stalked away, and Clara let out a shaky breath. Half of what she'd said was bluff. She had leads but not proof. Not yet, but she'd rattled him, and rattled men made mistakes. "You all right?" Jace materialized beside her. "Fine," she managed to smile. "Though I think things are about to get interesting." Pike returned then, grim-faced. "Found Maddox's cache. Enough dynamite to blow half the valley. We've got it secured, but he wouldn't stockpile it without a plan." Jace finished. "The dam," Clara said suddenly. "Not just the gates this time. He's going to blow the whole dam." They stared at her. "That would flood everything downstream," Pike said slowly. "Town, ranches. It would be a massacre." And in the chaos, who'd notice a few forged documents being filed, a few quick land grabs? Clara felt sick. Crane could claim half the valley before anyone recovered. The music still played, couples still danced. But now it felt like a dance macabre. Somewhere out there, Cole Maddox was planning devastation on an unimaginable scale. "We stop him," Jace said simply. "Whatever it takes, we stop him." Clara looked at the faces around her, determined, frightened, but unified in purpose. This was what Crane had truly feared. Not her evidence or clever legal maneuvers, but this a community choosing to stand together. "Together," she agreed, and felt the words settle into her bones like a vow. The stars wheeled overhead, impassive witnesses to human drama, as Mesquite Crossing prepared for the battle that would determine its fate. The moon hung low and bloated over the desert as Clara checked the boundary markers one last time. They'd been watching for Maddox for 3 days now, ever since discovering his cache of explosives. The waiting was wearing on everyone's nerves. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Jace's voice came from behind her. Clara didn't turn, keeping her eyes on the horizon. "I'm not alone. Tom's at the North Post. Samuel's watching the river crossing." "That's not what I meant." He moved closer, his presence warm against the cooling night air. "Crane's getting desperate. That makes him dangerous." "I know." She finally faced him, seeing the worry etched in the lines around his eyes. "But we can't let fear paralyze us." A shot cracked across the desert, followed by 2 more in quick succession, Tom's signal for the trouble. Without a word, they both started running toward the north pasture. They found Tom crouched behind a boulder, blood seeping from a graze on his temple. "Maddox!" he gasped. "Came out of nowhere. He's heading for the main corral." "The horses," Jace breathed. Without the remuda, the ranch would be crippled. They raced back, Clara's shorter legs pumping hard to keep up. As they crested the rise above the ranch, she saw him, Cole Maddox, moving through the shadows toward the corral gate. "The rifle," Jace muttered, reaching for his weapon. But they were too far, the shot too difficult in the darkness. Clara didn't think. She pulled the small pistol from her skirt, the one Rosa had insisted she carry, and fired into the air. The sharp report echoed across the valley. Maddox spun, his own gun appearing in his hand like magic. Moonlight caught the cold planes of his face as he spotted them. "Callahan," he called out, his voice carrying clearly. "This doesn't concern the woman. Send her away." "Everything on this ranch concerns me," Clara shouted back. Maddox's laugh was like winter wind. Loyal to the end, touching, but misguided. He kept his gun trained on them as he backed toward his horse. "You can't watch everywhere, Callahan, and you can't protect everyone." He vanished into the darkness, leaving them standing in the cold moonlight. Clara's hands shook as she lowered the pistol. "That was foolish," Jace said roughly. "You could have been killed. So could you. That's different." "No." She rounded on him, anger flashing. "It's not different. I'm not some delicate Eastern flower who needs protecting. I'm here. I'm part of this. And I'll face the same risks as anyone else. He caught her shoulders, his grip almost painful. You don't understand. I can't. He stopped, jaw working. I can't lose you too. The raw pain in his voice dissolved her anger. Jace, Sarah died because of me, he said harshly. Because I wasn't there, wasn't watching, because I thought she was safe. Sarah died because Crane poisoned her, Clara said firmly. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? His hands gentled on her shoulders, sliding down to her arms. I see the way he looks at you, like you're an obstacle to be removed. And You what? I can't breathe when you're out of my sight. The admission seemed torn from him. Can't think straight, can't... Clara silenced him the only way she could think of, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. For a moment, he stood frozen. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him as he kissed her back with desperate intensity. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she kept her hands fisted in his shirt. I'm not Sarah, she said fiercely. I'm not going to die on you, but I'm not going to hide either. We face this together, or not at all. He rested his forehead against hers. You're going to be the death of me, Clara Whitfield. No, she said softly. I'm going to be the life of you, if you'll let me. A shout from the ranch house shattered the moment. They ran back to find Chaos Rosa tending to a wounded vaquero, while Benji pressed rags to a gash in the man's side. Maddox doubled back. Rosa explained tersely. Hit the line shack where Miguel was watching the water station. Left him for dead. The water station, Clara breathed. He was creating a distraction. Jace was already moving. Tom, get every man who can ride. Another shot split the night, this time from the direction of the house. The window beside Clara exploded in a shower of glass. Down, Jace shoved her behind the heavy table as more shots peppered the walls. He's got us pinned. Not just him. Tom called from his position by the door. I count at least 3 shooters. Crane had hired more guns. Clara's mind raced as bullets whined overhead. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and Maddox was still out there somewhere. The root cellar, she said suddenly. The one from the sandstorm. It connects to the old mine shaft, doesn't it? Rosa nodded. Say, from the early days when they thought there was silver here. I can get out that way, circle around. No. Jace's voice was flat. Absolutely not. They don't know about it. Clara insisted. I can get to town. Bring help. I'll go. Tom volunteered. You're too big and injured. Clara met Jace's eyes steadily. It has to be me. Another volley of shots decided it. They couldn't hold out much longer, and Marshal Pike was too far away to hear the gunfire. I'm going with her, Benji piped up. No, Clara and Jace said simultaneously. I know the tunnels better than anyone, the boy insisted. And I'm faster than Tom. Before anyone could stop him, Benji darted for the cellar door. Clara had no choice but to follow, Jace's curses ringing in her ears. The tunnel was darker than Clara remembered, the air thick and stale. Benji led with confidence, his small form navigating obstacles she could barely see. There's a branch here that comes out near the old cottonwood, he whispered, past their line. They emerged into moonlight, gasping clean air. The gunfire continued behind them, but sporadically now. Clara oriented herself and started running toward town, Benji at her heels. They'd made it perhaps a mile when hoofbeats thundered behind them. Clara shoved Benji into a cluster of sagebrush and crouched beside him, heart hammering. The rider passed so close she could have touched the horse. Cole Maddox, heading back toward town, which meant, he's going for the dam, she breathed. Tonight, while everyone's distracted at the ranch. We can beat him there, Benji said. I know a shortcut. They ran through arroyos and over ridges.
Benji's knowledge of the landscape invaluable. Clara's side ached and her lungs burned, but she didn't slow. They reached the dam just as Maddox was unloading his saddlebags. Dynamite, enough to turn the entire structure into rubble. Get to town, Clara whispered to Benji. Find Marshal Pike. What are you going to do? She checked her pistol. 2 shots left. Stop him! Benji's eyes widened, but he nodded and slipped away. Clara crept closer, using the shadows of the equipment sheds for cover. Maddox worked methodically, placing charges at key points. Professional, precise, deadly. That's far enough, Clara said, stepping into the open. He didn't even look surprised. Miss Whitfield, I wondered when you'd show up. His hand rested casually on his gun. You're predictable. It's your weakness. Step away from the dynamite. Or what you'll shoot me. He smiled coldly. You're not a killer. I can see it in your eyes. Maybe not, Clara admitted. But I don't have to kill you, just stop you. She aimed at the dynamite. His eyes widened if she hit it wrong. They'd both die in the explosion. You're bluffing. Am I? Her hand was steady despite her racing heart. I've lost everything else. My family, my name, my future. What's my life against saving this town? Stay with me, fully only you. The words, spoken soft and desperate, made her freeze. Not Maddox's voice. Jace, emerging from the shadows, rifle trained on the gunman. Touching, Maddox drawled. The cavalry arrives. It's over, Maddox. Put down the gun. I think not. Maddox's draw was lightning fast, but Jace was ready. The rifle cracked, and Maddox spun, his shot going wild. He fell to one knee, clutching his shoulder. Clara kicked his gun away, then began pulling the dynamite free from its positions. Her hands shook now that the immediate danger was past. How? She asked Jace. Benji doubled back. Told us your plan. I took Tom's horse. He kept the rifle on Maddox while helping her clear the explosives. That was the bravest, most foolish thing I've ever seen. Which part? All of it. He caught her hand, dynamite and all. What I said before, stay with me. I meant it. Not just tonight, always. Jace, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. His eyes burned into hers. I've wasted too much time already, locked in the past. You woke me up, Clara, showed me I could live again, love again. So I'm asking, begging, stay with me. Fully, only you. Clara's throat tightened. Only you, she whispered back. The moment shattered as horses approached Marshal Pike and a posse, with Benji leading on a borrowed mount. Well, Pike surveyed the scene. Looks like you've been busy. As they secured Maddox and the explosives, Clara noticed lights approaching from another direction. Torches, a mob. Crane, Jace said grimly. Come to finish what Maddox started. But as the crowd drew closer, Clara realized it wasn't Crane's men. It was the townspeople ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, Morrison and Martinez at the front, faces set with determination. We heard the shooting, Morrison said. Came as fast as we could. All of you. Clara stared at the crowd, easily 50 people, all armed. You stood for us, Martinez said simply. We stand for you. Crane appeared then, still immaculate despite the late hour, but his composure cracked when he saw Maddox in custody and his plan in ruins. This proves nothing, he blustered. A hired hand acting alone. Save it. Pike cut him off. We've got enough to hold you until the circuit judge arrives, and Miss Whitfield's evidence will do the rest. As they led Crane away, Clara felt the adrenaline finally fade. She swayed, and Jace caught her. Home, he asked softly. Home, she agreed. They rode back slowly. The crisis passed, but its echoes remaining. The ranch was scarred with bullet holes, and Miguel would need weeks to heal. But they'd survived. As dawn painted the mountains pink and gold,
Clara stood on the porch where this had all began. So much had changed since that first day. "Regrets?" Jace asked, joining her. "Never." She leaned into his warmth. "Though I could do without being shot at. I'll see what I can arrange." His arm came around her. "Clara, what I said at the dam." "Yes. I haven't asked yet?" "Then ask." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Clara Whitfield, will you stay with me, not as my bookkeeper or ranch hand, but as my wife? Will you help me build something here, something lasting?" "Yes," she said again, tears blurring her vision. "Forever yes." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, full of promise. Behind them, Rosa and Benji watched from the kitchen window, smiling. The sun rose fully, burning away the shadows of night. There would be more battles ahead: the trial, the struggle to rebuild what Crane had damaged. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. And in the barn, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, sat a small wooden button Jace had carved during the long watches. A simple thing, but perfect for the wedding dress Clara would wear when the circuit preacher next came through. Some things were worth waiting for. Some things were worth fighting for. And some things, once found, were worth everything. The makeshift courtroom in Mesquite Crossing's town hall buzzed with anticipation. Every seat was filled, with more people lining the walls. Judge Theodore Harrigan, silver-haired and stern-faced, surveyed the crowd with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This court will come to order," he commanded, his gavel cracking like a gunshot. Clara sat at the prosecution's table, her evidence carefully organized before her. Across the aisle, Silas Crane managed to look confident despite the shackles on his wrists. His lawyer, a slick man from Santa Fe named Pemberton, whispered urgently in his ear. "Miss Whitfield," Judge Harrigan addressed her, "I understand you'll be presenting evidence in this matter. Highly unusual for a woman, but Marshal Pike assures me you're qualified." "I am, Your Honor." Clara stood, ignoring the murmurs from the gallery. "I've prepared a complete financial analysis of Mr. Crane's activities over the past 18 months. "Objection." Pemberton rose smoothly. "Miss Whitfield has no legal standing. She's not an attorney, not a bank official." "She's an expert witness," Marshal Pike interrupted. "And the territorial prosecutor has authorized her testimony." Judge Harrigan nodded. "I'll allow it. Proceed, Miss Whitfield." Clara began methodically, laying out the paper trail she'd uncovered, the forged documents, the shell companies, the pattern of intimidation. She kept her voice steady, professional, letting the evidence speak for itself. "These ledgers," she indicated the books before her, "show systematic falsification of debt records. Note the different ink colors, the inconsistent dates, the watermarks that don't match the supposed year of creation." "Speculation," Pemberton objected. "Different inks prove nothing." "Perhaps this will be more convincing." Clara produced the letter she'd found. Mr. Crane's own words, detailing his plan to control the valley's water rights. Crane's confident expression finally cracked. "That was obtained illegally." "Actually," Marshal Pike said mildly, "it was found during a lawful search of the bank premises, following Mr. Maddox's arrest." The crowd stirred as Clara continued her testimony. She showed how Crane had poisoned wells, forged debts, used intimidation and violence to force sales. The evidence was overwhelming, damning. "But the most crucial piece," Clara said, producing a new document, "is this: the original Spanish land grant, which I located in the territorial archives in Santa Fe." Pemberton shot to his feet. "Objection, this wasn't in discovery." "Because I only found it last week," Clara continued calmly. "It clearly shows that the water rights were never divisible. Any attempt to reunify them through coercion is legally void." Judge Harrigan studied the document carefully. "This appears authentic, Mr. Pemberton. Does your client wish to respond?"
But chaos erupted before Pemberton could answer. The courtroom doors burst open, and Cole Maddox stood there, one arm in a sling but a gun in his other hand. "Everyone down," he shouted. People screamed, diving for cover. Clara froze as Maddox's gun swung toward her. "You ruined everything," he snarled. "You and your meddling—" Several things happened at once. Benji, who'd been sitting with Rosa, flung his precious arithmetic book at Maddox's head. The gunman flinched, his shot going wide, shattering the window behind Clara. Jace launched himself from his seat, tackling Maddox as Marshal Pike drew her weapon. The struggle was brief but violent. Maddox, wounded and outnumbered, was quickly subdued. As they hauled him away, he locked eyes with Crane. "You said she'd be easy to remove." Maddox spat. "You said no one would listen to a woman." "Shut up, you fool!" Crane hissed. Well, Judge Harrigan said dryly once order was restored. "Mr. Maddox seems to have provided additional testimony. Mr. Crane, would you care to explain your associate's comments?" The trial proceeded swiftly after that, faced with overwhelming evidence and Maddox's outburst. Crane's defense crumbled. By noon, Judge Harrigan had heard enough. "Silas Crane," he pronounced. "This court finds you guilty of fraud, conspiracy, assault, and attempted murder. You'll be transported to the territorial prison to await formal sentencing." As they led Crane away, he paused beside Clara. "This isn't over," he whispered. "I have friends. Influence." "You have nothing," Clara replied quietly. "Your accounts are frozen. Your property seized for restitution. Your friends will abandon you like rats from a sinking ship." His face twisted with rage, but the marshals dragged him on. The courtroom erupted in celebration. Clara found herself embraced by people who'd once viewed her with suspicion, Morrison pumping her hand, Mrs. Garrett actually smiling, the Martinez family blessing her in rapid Spanish. "You did it," Jace said, pulling her close. "You actually did it." "We did it," Clara corrected, seeing Marshal Pike organizing the crowd, Rosa comforting a shaken Benji, the community that had stood together. But the day wasn't over. Thomas Winters had arrived from Denver, ready to testify, and his additional evidence revealed more of Crane's network. By evening, 3 more arrests had been made, including the corrupt bank manager who'd helped forge the documents. As the sun set, the town organized an impromptu celebration. Tables appeared in the square, laden with food. Musicians tuned their instruments. It felt like the whole valley had come to mark the end of Crane's reign of terror. "Dance with me," Jace requested, and Clara let him lead her into the crowd of couples. "It's really over," she marveled as they swayed together. "This part is," he spun her gently. "Now comes the rebuilding, fixing the damage Crane did, making things right." "Together," Clara said firmly. "Together," he agreed, then cleared his throat. "Speaking of which, I have something for you." He pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, was a simple gold ring. "It was my mother's," Jace explained. "I've been carrying it around for a week, waiting for the right moment, but I realized there's no perfect moment. There's just now, and the promise of tomorrow." Clara's eyes misted. "Jace, I know we said we'd wait for the circuit preacher, but Judge Harrigan's still here, and—" He took a breath. "Clara Whitfield, will you marry me tonight here, with our whole community as witness?" The music had stopped. Clara realized everyone was watching, waiting. She saw Rosa's encouraging smile, Benji's gap-toothed grin, Marshal Pike's approving nod. "Yes," she said clearly. "Absolutely yes." The square erupted in cheers. Judge Harrigan, fortified with a glass of whiskey, agreed to perform the ceremony. Rosa produced a lace veil that had been her grandmother's. The Methodist minister offered his Bible. The whole town, it seemed, contributed something. As Clara stood before the judge,
Jace's hand warm in hers. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a Philadelphia mansion to a dusty railroad platform, from suspicion to acceptance, from loneliness to love. "Do you, Clara, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Judge Harrigan asked. "I do." "Do you, James, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I pronounce you husband and wife." Jace kissed her as the crowd cheered, and Clara felt the last walls around her heart crumble. She was home. Truly, finally home. The celebration continued late into the night. Stories were told of Crane's defeat, of Clara's bravery, of the community's resilience. Plans were made for the future, a new school, with Clara volunteering to teach until a proper schoolmaster could be found. A water management board with representatives from each ranch. A future built on cooperation rather than competition. "Happy?" Jace asked as they finally slipped away from the party. "Beyond words." Clara leaned into him as they walked toward their ranch. "Though I do wonder what challenge will find us next." "Whatever it is, we'll face it." "Together," they said in unison, laughing. Behind them, the lights of Mesquite Crossing glowed warm in the desert night. The jail held Silas Crane and his conspirators. The dam stood strong, promising water for all. And in the town square, their friends and neighbors danced on, celebrating not just a wedding but a victory of community over greed. As they reached the ranch, Clara paused on the porch where she'd first arrived as a desperate refugee. Now she stood as Clara Callahan, teacher, rancher's wife, defender of justice, and adopted daughter of the desert. "No regrets?" Jace asked, echoing his question from days before. "Only one," Clara admitted, his brow furrowed. "What?" "That it took a train explosion to bring me here." She smiled up at him. "I should have come sooner." He laughed, sweeping her into his arms. "Better late than never, Mrs. Callahan." "Much better," she agreed, as he carried her over the threshold of their new life. Outside, a rare desert rain began to fall, gentle and life-giving, washing the dust from the air and bringing the promise of green growth to the valley. It was, everyone agreed later, a perfect omen for new beginnings. In the barn, Benji had already hung a sign he'd painted himself Callahan Ranch Jace, Clara, and Benji Family. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the mountains, it would find Mesquite Crossing forever changed, a town that had faced down tyranny and won, a community forged in crisis and strengthened by courage. But most of all, it would find 3 people who'd built a family from loss and love, proving that sometimes the best treasures were the ones you never expected to find. The desert bloomed, and life went on, richer for the trials that had tested it. 6 months after Crane's trial, the Rio del Lobo Valley had transformed. The spring rains, heavier than usual, had turned the desert into a carpet of wildflowers, purple lupines, golden poppies, and delicate desert marigolds that swayed in the gentle breeze. Clara stood on the hill overlooking the expanded Half Moon Ranch, one hand resting on her growing belly, the other shading her eyes from the morning sun. Below, she could see Jace working with the horses. Benji perched on the fence offering enthusiastic but dubious advice. "You shouldn't climb hills in your condition," Rosa scolded, appearing beside her with a basket. The doctor said moderate exercise was healthy. Clara countered with a smile. "Besides, I wanted to see the new irrigation channels from up here." The Water Management Board, established after Crane's downfall, had revolutionized the valley. Instead of fighting over water, the ranchers now shared it through an intricate system of scheduled releases and maintained channels. The Half Moon's pastures had never been greener. "Letter came for you," Rosa said, producing an envelope from her apron. "From Denver." Clara recognized Thomas Winters's handwriting immediately. The former bank clerk had become a valuable ally, helping untangle Crane's financial web and ensuring restitution for his victims. "Dear Mrs. Callahan," she read aloud. "I thought you should know that Harold Ashford was arrested yesterday in Chicago. It seems your father finally developed a conscience, or perhaps just a healthy fear of scandal. He provided evidence of Ashford's crimes to the authorities. You're truly free now." Clara folded the letter carefully, feeling a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying lift from her shoulders. "Free," she repeated softly. "You always were," Rosa said firmly. "From the moment you stepped off that train, now come, we have work to do for the Harvest Festival." The Harvest Festival had grown from a simple celebration to a major event, drawing people from across the territory. The school Clara had helped establish would be officially dedicated, and there were rumors that the territorial governor himself might attend. As they descended the hill, Clara saw a dust cloud approaching riders, moving fast. Her hand went instinctively to the pistol she still carried, old habits dying hard. But it was Marshal Pike who crested the rise, accompanied by several men Clara didn't recognize. Their expressions were grim. "Clara, Jace," Pike called out. "We've got trouble." They gathered in the main house, the strangers introducing themselves as federal marshals from Santa Fe. Silas Crane escaped during a prison transfer. The lead marshal, a weathered man named Morrison, explained. "Killed 2 guards, disappeared into the desert. We think he's heading this way." Clara felt ice in her veins. "When?" "3 days ago. We've been tracking him, but—" Morrison shrugged apologetically. "He knows this country. He'll come here," Jace said with certainty. "He blames Clara for everything." "Which is why we're posting men." "No." Clara stood, her mind racing. "That's what he expects. Guards, protection, us hiding." She looked at Pike. "The festival is tomorrow. The whole valley will be here." "You're not suggesting we use the festival as bait?" Pike asked. "I'm suggesting we don't let him dictate our lives anymore." Clara moved to the window, staring out at the peaceful ranch. "Post your men, but hidden. Let him come. Let him see that everything he tried to destroy has only grown stronger." The debate was fierce, but eventually, Clara's logic won out. The festival would proceed, but with armed men stationed discreetly throughout. It was a risk, but cowering in fear felt like letting Crane win. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Wagons began arriving early, families dressed in their finest, children racing between the booths that had been set up. The aroma of roasting meat and fresh bread filled the air. Clara wore her best dress, a deep blue that Jace said matched her eyes with the wooden button he'd carved for her fastened at the throat. She moved through the crowd, greeting neighbors, admiring quilts and preserves, judging pie contests, to anyone watching. She was simply the rancher's wife enjoying the festival. But her eyes never stopped scanning, and she was acutely aware of the federal marshals trying to blend in with varying degrees of success. "You're wound tighter than a watch spring," Jace murmured, appearing at her elbow. "I can't help feeling—" "I know, but look around." He gestured at the scene before them. Morrison's children playing tag, the Martinez family teaching everyone their traditional dances, Mrs. Garrett actually being pleasant. This is what we fought for. He was right. The community that had once been divided by suspicion and greed now worked together like a well-oiled machine. The water flowed fairly, the school thrived, and prosperity had returned to the valley. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Patterson called out, "it's time for the dedication of the Mesquite Crossing School." The crowd gathered before the neat adobe building that had been constructed with donated labor and materials. Clara had spent countless hours here, teaching arithmetic and reading to eager students of all ages. "We owe this school to many people," Patterson continued, "but especially to Clara Callahan, who not only helped establish it but has served as our teacher these past months." Applause rippled through the crowd. Clara felt herself blushing as she was called forward. "Speech," someone called out. and others took up the cry. Clara looked out at the faces weathered ranchers, tough miners, their wives and children, her family now, in all the ways that mattered. When I first arrived in Mesquite Crossing, she began, I was running from a life that offered no choices, from a future I couldn't accept. I thought I was looking for a place to hide. She paused, finding Jace's eyes in the crowd. Instead, I found a place to stand, a community worth fighting for, people who judged me not by my name or my past, but by my actions. This school represents more than education. It represents hope, the belief that our children deserve better than what we had. That knowledge is power, and power should belong to everyone, not just the wealthy few. Silas Crane tried to divide us, control us through fear and greed. He failed because the shot came from the bell tower, the bullet kicking up dust at Clara's feet. People screamed, scattering, as Silas Crane emerged from his hiding spot, wild-eyed and gaunt from his time on the run. Failed, he shouted, levering another round into his rifle. I'm not done yet. But the federal marshals were ready. They converged from all directions as Crane tried to sight on Clara again. Jace had already pulled her behind the podium, shielding her with his body. It's over. Crane! Marshal Morrison shouted. Put down the weapon. Nothing's over until she pays. Crane swung the rifle wildly. She took everything from me. You took everything from yourself, Clara called out, surprising everyone by standing up despite Jace's attempts to keep her down. Your greed, your cruelty, your inability to see that there was enough for everyone if we just worked together. Shut up, Crane's voice cracked. You don't understand anything. This was supposed to be mine, all of it. And now it belongs to everyone, Clara said firmly. The water, the land, the future. That's what really burns you, isn't it? Not that you lost, but that we all won. Crane's face contorted with rage. He raised the rifle, but before he could fire, a small figure darted from the crowd. Benji, moving with the fearless speed of youth, had grabbed a lariat from a nearby display. The rope sailed through the air, tangling Crane's rifle just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, and in that moment of confusion, the marshals struck. Crane went down under a pile of lawmen, his screams of rage fading to whimpers as they hauled him away for the final time. Clara felt Jace's arms around her, felt the community closing ranks protectively. Benji stood proudly, accepting backslaps and hair ruffling from the adults. That was incredibly foolish, Clara told the boy sternly, then pulled him into a fierce hug. And incredibly brave. I learned from the best. Benji grinned. The festival resumed with determined cheer. If anything, Crane's final defeat only strengthened the celebration. The school was dedicated. The dancing continued, and as night fell, Chinese lanterns were lit throughout the ranch. Clara stood with Jace on their porch, watching the festivities. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the new life stirring within. Any regrets now? Jace asked, his standard question taking on new meaning. None, Clara said firmly, though I could have done without being shot at. Again. I'll add it to the list of things to avoid, he said dryly, right after sandstorms and dynamite. Rosa appeared with a shawl for Clara. You need to rest. The little one needs peace after such excitement. The little one seems to thrive on excitement, Clara countered, but she accepted the shawl gratefully. Speaking of which, Rosa continued with a knowing smile, Benji's been asking if the baby will need a big brother to teach them important things, like roping outlaws. Clara laughed. Heaven help us. As the evening wound down, families began departing with warm farewells and promises to meet again soon. The federal marshals had long since left with their prisoner. Peace, real peace, settled over the valley like a benediction. Next spring will be even better, Jace said, his hand covering Clara's on her belly. New baby, new foals, new growth everywhere. A new chapter, Clara agreed. though hopefully with fewer gunfights. I make no promises, he teased. You do seem to attract trouble. I attracted you, didn't I? Exactly my point. They stood together, watching the last lanterns bob away into the darkness. The half-moon ranch stood strong around them, built on love, trust, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. Inside, Benji was already asleep in his room, worn out from his heroics. His arithmetic book lay open on the desk he'd been working ahead, eager to impress his adopted mother with his progress. I have something for you, Jace said suddenly, producing a small wrapped package. Clara opened it to find a leather journal, beautifully tooled with her initials, her new initials. C.C. Clara Callahan. For your next adventure, he explained. Whatever that might be. Our next adventure, she corrected, kissing him softly. Partner. As they went inside, closing the door on the night, a coyote called from the distant hills, but it was a lonely sound no longer. The desert had bloomed, the community had triumphed, and love had conquered all. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Clara and Jace's journey touched your heart as much as it did mine. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect over our shared love of these frontier tales. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night, give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover these romantic adventures under the desert stars. Until next time, partners.